Welcome, my viewers, to the Follow the Reader program. Today we are in chapter 3 of the book Blossoms of the Savannah by Henry Olekulet. Let's read together. Follow the Reader. When their father pointed out their house amongst other red-tiled ones on top of a hill, the girls could hardly believe their eyes. That imposing huge building enclosed in a stone-walled perimeter fence could not be their home. They nudged one another excitedly as they giggled and threw furtive glances at their father. The oppressive gloom that had weighed upon their hearts as they drove down the road suddenly lifted and dissipated. An atmosphere of excitement and anticipation pervaded their hearts. Their faces were radiant. Their feet quickened as they walked the remaining distance with bated breath. Mama Milanoi was also happy. Although she had not seen the house before then, she knew it was tastefully built. She had always trusted her husband to do the best for the family. There was no reason, therefore, for her to have doubted him. She married him 22 years ago, not only to meet the expectations of the Nasila people, but also to get someone to look after her and her children. And true to her expectations, Olekaelo had always been responsible. Even as she sat happily beside him, that sunny afternoon, she let her mind travel fancifully into her past. She recalled with amusement the pride of her father and mother when the parents of one Pasimei Olekaelo, accompanied by other elders, came to their home to engage her. Her parents were all along determined to find a well-to-do son-in-law, preferably from a well-known family. When the suitor happened to be a young man reputed to be an upcoming businessman, her parents were satisfied that their daughter would not only be in safe hands, but that their grandchildren would have a dependable protector. After what appeared to her to be protracted negotiation, the parties agreed and she was betrothed. She accepted him without any resistance. Tradition did not allow her to offer any as expected of her. She did not resist. So at 18, after undergoing the mandatory initiation ritual, she had married Pasimei Olekaelo, who was then 24 years old. And although over the years he had scolded and bullied her like a half-witted child, she knew he was a good man, a great provider, a foresighted planner, and a man with a will to succeed in whatever he put his mind on. She also knew that he loved her genuinely, for even after all those years of marriage, he still pampered her. She loved him too and had a childlike dependence on him. She, however, knew that she had failed miserably by not giving him the son that he had so much looked forward to. But she also knew it was still not too late. God could still favor her with a son or two. And now that she had gone back to the home of the gods of motherhood, she was going to join the rest of the Nasila women in their central prayer, song and praise, Enkai Amono and Tomo, a prayer exhorting God to open women's womb. She turned and looked at her daughters. They were full of animation as they walked hurriedly down the road that led to the gate. That made her happy. She was even happier to see Resian, who was often pessimist, looking exuberant that afternoon. She hoped they would always be that happy. But she knew things had not been easy for them. At that delicate stage of their lives, she knew relocation to an extremely harsh environment, devoid their friends and all that they had known throughout their lives, was not only trying, but cruel. She feared even a worse looming scenario. Poor innocent thing. How she wished she could shield and protect them. But could she? She knew Nasila people were extremely intolerant of those who ignored their cherished cultural sensibilities. And the case of her daughters was no exception. Mama Milanoi was so engrossed in her thought that she hardly noticed that they had arrived at the gate of their new home. Her husband's voice jolted her back to reality. Lano Ayonayo, the endearing diminutive that he only used in the most intimate of circumstances, stopped her in her track. She straightened up and her eyes widened. This is the home that I had always dreamt I would one day build for you and my beloved daughter. he said emotionally, and dramatically dipped his hand into his coat pocket, removing a key. For a brief moment, the air around them was expectantly taut. The girls stood breathless, staring fixedly at the gate. The whole episode seemed magical. And like a magician, Olekaelo stood beaming ecstatically, his hand ready to unveil the object of his magic. He inserted the key into the keyhole, turned it, and as it clicked open, he swung the gate open to reveal a home that was breathtakingly beautiful, that they could have only imagined in a fantastic dream. They were stunned. Father of all creation, Mama Milano exclaimed loudly, "This is but a dream. It is magnificent," enthused Tayo in an ecstasy of delight. "Enkai supat." "I have not seen anything like it," completed Resian, enthralled. "Eitu eikata adol." The air of excitement that danced about the Akaelo family was so exhilarating, and for a long moment none of them moved. Their eyes were glued to the exquisite house before them. Olekaelo ushered them into the sprawling homestead with its lush, well-tended lawn. Here and there were squat, robust ilopon trees. Clusters of Ileleshua, Osinoni, and Elikipanyani bushes dotted the compound, while beyond the house, hanging on the stone perimeter wall, was a blaze of bougainvillea climbers in red, cream, and purple. When they got to the front of the house, they could hardly believe their eyes. Truly, their new house was a dream come true. Resian looked about her with fascinated eyes, while Tayo, itching to enter and see for herself, took the lead and proceeded to mount the graceful sweep of steps before reaching the front door. And when their father opened the door, they were breathless. They filed through into a spacious hallway that led to a large living room, lavishly furnished with familiar furniture. The girls ran from room to room, curiously trying to find their orientation. Surprisingly, the house looked familiar. What they did not know was that all the rooms were a replica of their former house in Nakuru. It was not easy to distinguish it from the Nakuru flat. Back in the living room, Tayo, Resian, and their mother began to speak at once. They spoke of its size, convenience, and furniture fitting. After a hurriedly prepared dinner, the girls retired to their bedroom to arrange and tidy it up. Cartons of their clothes, bedding, books, and other personal effects were still piled up on their unmade beds. Curtains were yet to be hung, as were their pictures and decorations. Tayo removed her cardigans and immediately swung into action. She loosened the ropes that tied curtains, emptied their contents onto the floor, and sorted them. After some time, the large room that held their big bed was in shambles. Shoes lay strewn all over, books were stacked in heaps on the floor, and clothes beddings were scattered on the bed. Exhausted, she straightened up and stood hands on her hips, eyeing in growing expiration her sister, who sat on a chair at one corner of the room, reading a book. "Surely, Resian," she complained to her sharply, "is this the time to read a book with all this mess around us? Do your bit now. I will do mine tomorrow," Resian replied with a nonchalant carelessness. "I insist that you get up right now and get to work," Tayo raised her voice. "We need to arrange this room before we get to bed." Resian grunted. She reluctantly laid the books down and went to work. They reviewed the events of the last 2 days as they tried to bring order to the room. "There is such a contrast between Nakuru and this place," Tayo said quietly. "It's so quiet and tranquil here." "I don't know, but I feel an oppressive silence," Resian said defiantly. "A little noise is not all that bad." "Don't befuddle me with your weird kind of reasoning," said Tayo, getting impatient. "Do you prefer the Nakuru bus stage to this serene atmosphere?" "No, not at all," Resian said seriously. "I would rather live in the most noisy place on earth than live anywhere near a vagabond who would accost me in the most quiet and serene atmosphere with the intention of mutilating my sexuality. Of course, I also don't care whether I'm counted among Intoye and Mangalana," an embarrassed Tayo said as she began to fold clothes, not looking at her sister. "What I know is that my body belongs to me. I belong to myself." She picked up a pillow, tossed it onto the bed, plumped it up, and looking around said fiercely, Only when I'm dead would anybody mutilate my body. Don't you think they can force us to undergo the ritual? Resian asked fearfully. What do you think will happen to us if Papa is forced by his clansmen to embrace the archaic culture that would require us to get the cat? Resian Eio, I hope nothing of that sort happens, for if it does, she shrugged her shoulders and pulled an expressive face. I don't know what would happen to us. That's why it is imperative that you persuade Papai to allow us to go to Nakuru to enroll at the university, said Resian vehemently as she threw herself onto the bed, her arms behind her head. We must beat them to it. We must convince him that to let us go before they prevail upon us to embrace outdated and archaic tradition. I'll do that soonest, dear sister, said Tayo dutifully. I'll try to persuade him to see our way. How soon is soonest? Resian cried out resignedly and added petulantly. I would never want to be confronted again by a deranged vagabond in this wild and frightening jungle that Papai has thrown us into. Hush, little sister, please don't cry. Tayo cooed soothingly as if singing a lullaby to a crying baby. Your big sister will make sure that no harm comes your way and that you get what you yearn for. Just wait and see. Tayo stood by the bed for a while watching her sister who lay forlorn, staring through the window into the brightly moonlit sky outside. Then she sat on the bed beside her and reassuringly touched Resian's cheek gently with the back of her hand. Ever since they were young attending nursery school, she had been fiercely devoted to her sister. When they went to primary school, Resian clung to her for protection from bigger girls who wanted to bully her. When they went to primary school, Resian clung to her for protection from the bigger girls who wanted to bully her. And in these growing years, even at secondary school, Tayo always sensed her sister's yearning. She had made it her duty to mop her younger sister's tears, soothe her anger, and gently reassure her when she was badly shaken, as often happened after the frequent tongue lashing from their father. For reasons she did not understand, she had always found their father strangely and harshly impatient towards Resian. She was sure it was that inexplicable attitude of her father towards Resian that had contributed to her tempestuous disposition. Even stranger was that their mother's failure to come to Resian's defense. It was as if her motherly instinct could not extend her protective wing to cover Resian. And so, in the absence of their mother's protection and in the face of their father's constant provocation and intimidation, Resian's dependence on Tayo strengthened, and Tayo would have ached by her sister's ever-present nagging complaints had she not been so deeply aware of her never-ending unhappiness. Although Resian had a lot to complain and grumble about life in their new environment, Tayo found it tolerable. For instance, she gladly discovered that mornings at their new home began with a lively chatter of birds in the trees surrounding their house. That gave the house an atmosphere of tranquility and peace. However, one of the unpleasant aspects that the girls had to live with was the constant violation of their privacy. In Nasila, they soon discovered the home belonged to all clans members. It was not an unusual thing to get up in the morning to find the living room full of men and women who came that early not for any tangible business, but simply to share a sumptuous breakfast with their kith and kin. Tayo and Resian were soon to get used to hearing an urgent knock at the door very early in the morning. On opening, they would invariably be met by a grinning group of men and women who would unashamedly ask them what they were doing in bed that late in the morning. They would proceed to take seats in the living room and order them to serve them with breakfast. When they got used to what they first considered to be negative aspects of Nasila culture, Tayo and Resian adjusted accordingly, and soon they began to live harmoniously with the people. Their father was out of the homestead most of the time working at the shop and organizing other business matters. His absence also meant the absence of his irksome and corrosive remarks that always heightened tension in the house. In his absence, the house was a continuous joy with comfort and convenience, and the girls found it a pleasure to keep it clean and well arranged. Mingling with the women folk, the girls learned a great deal about the hilarious, the absurd, and the weird aspect of Nasila culture. They also met a variety of women. Although most of the women who visited Pasimei's home did so for entertainment purposes, others visited with definite purposes. A great number of them came to survey and get to know the girls well so that they could have sufficient information on which to decide whether they were marriageable and commendable to their husbands to be married as their incainito. Others came looking for potential wives for their sons, while Inkaitoini and Inkamurutani came to make acquaintance with potential clients. So when their father announced one evening that he was planning a homecoming ceremony, the girls, especially Chaiyo, no longer felt strangers. Thank you very much. That is the end of our third chapter in the Blossoms of the Savannah. Keep following the reader and always subscribe. Thank you very much.